I thank the organizers for this invitation. And I'd just like to reiterate what Sabita said. After that feast in the morning, I'm actually taking you back to square one, because what I'll be talking to you about is essentially what the ethics committee looks forward to and the need for the ethics committee in this milieu. So all of us know that after having taken the Hippocratic oath, when we start off as practitioners, we do take on this primary responsibility, and that is do no harm if you can do no good, at least to the patient, family, or society. There are several stakeholders in medical research. It's the participant, most importantly, the participant's family. The researcher, the investigator, the hospital institute sponsor, the various regulatory bodies, and of course, society at large. Now, why is ethics important? We've learned from history that some of the pivotal discoveries in medicine have actually been a consequence of, if I would say, poor ethics. And this brings us to why ethics is important. These are a few examples that most of us are familiar with. And this is unfortunately the truth. And this is what led, luckily, to the establishment of ethics. This is an example that most of us are familiar with, the thalidomide research. And of course, it was a very unfortunate thing that happened. And though it promised big things, it went into disrepute because of the way it was conducted. This brought into focus several other things. And the thalidomide experiment unfortunately happened despite the existence of the Declaration of Geneva, the Nuremberg Code, and finally, of course, it was the Helsinki Declaration, which was an amalgamation of the Nuremberg and the Declaration of Geneva Codes. And of course, today, this document should be considered the property of humanity. We also in India, and that has actually led to the basis for the ICH GCP guidelines. And the summary actually includes all that you need to know and need to incorporate while conducting an ethical research. Now, the basic principles of ethics in research, of course, constitute these various components. They begin with integrity. That is the most important aspect of research, I feel, and that is the basis of all research that we conduct. Now, considering the various aspects, non-maleficence, again, do no harm, beneficence and autonomy are the primary pillars of conducting ethical research. Now, just a few lines about all these aspects. Non-maleficence, do no harm. Beneficence, maximize the benefits of the participants. Autonomy, this is another basic principle of conducting good research, and that's essentially to see that the subject at any point in time retains his or her right to say no to participation. Openness, disclose what is the standard of care, discuss what are the harms and benefits from participation in the clinical trial, and have an open dialogue with the patient or the subject at all points in time. The other important aspects, of course, are objectivity, integrity, again, which is most important, confidentiality. You would protect both the patient and the researcher's information as well as personal records. Justice, again, a primary importance. Now, there are several governing organizations for ethical research, for ethics in the world. And in India, it is essentially the ICMR with the DCGI and the CDESCO. Of course, in India, we have the Indian Code of Conduct, which is, of course, it starts with the CDESCO guidelines in December 2001, essentially based on the ICH GCP, WHO, and the US FDA and European GCP guidelines. They were revised in the revised Schedule Y was proposed in January 2005 with a Gazette notification with further modifications after incidents that took place in our country in January 2013, released in December 2014. We have the latest GSR, which was released on the 19th of March 2019. And today we don't have the Schedule Y, and it is the NDCT, which is the New Drugs and Devices Act. And then, of course, you have the ICMR Guidelines 2017. Of course, there are various accrediting bodies for your ethics societies, and these include in India, the NABH. We have the AHRPP from the US, and of course, SIDCR is something that we have across the Asia Pacific. Now, why ethics research, especially in low income and low to middle income countries? Ethical reasons essentially constitute the socioeconomic milieu, large patient pool that is available, usual lesser regulations from authority for trial initiation, lesser financial obligations, the paternalistic attitude that we still have in our countries, and the availability of a skilled workforce with good setups in several of our countries. Of course, other reasons encompass several other reasons like a poor legal framework, data correction validation is often ignored, and patient compensation may be much lower than if these trials were done in HICs. Now, this is a story from Kerala. Way back in 1999, this trial was actually a multicentric trial, a multinational trial that was initiated with the Johns Hopkins University Hospital. But the trial started in the clinical population, the phase 3 part, the phase 2 part actually without even receiving the approval for the phase 1 part. And what it really led to was a greater awareness, the institution, as well as the initiation of stricter measures, stricter ethical principles for the conduct of clinical trials in our country. And these are various other examples to talk about the same thing which led to stricter regulations in India for actually the initiation and the incorporation of ethics within research in its true sense. So what does the country mandate today? An institutional body that is responsible for ethics in medical research is the Institutional Ethics Committee. It has to be registered with the Central Drug Standard Control Organization, the CDSCO. And of course, it has a quorum that is mandatory for the conduct of any meeting of the Ethics Committee. And it has to have these 5 members present definitely. A maximum number of 15 members should be present. And of course, in Tata, because of the numbers of trials that we have and to have an ongoing oversight, we also have a subcommittee that is the Data Safety and Monitoring Unit. Now, what is the role? Of course, it's supervise for the participants, provision of information, ensure study protocol is followed, management of untoward consequences and support for compensation. For the researcher, it looks at whether it has been done as per the laid down SOPs, and of course, at large, it is for the society. The protection of rights of the participant is absolutely important by ensuring that potential participants are able to acquire and understand the information that is needed to make a valid decision to enter the study, by ensuring that facilities and insurance arrangements are adequate to manage the untoward consequences of research. A provision of information, and this is the most important aspect because this is what constitutes the informed consent form, to see that the participant is aware of all aspects of the study, the benefits, the harms, what happens if there is any harm caused because of study participation, and most importantly, the ability for him or her to exercise autonomy, the voluntariness of participation, and of course, the choice to withdraw at any time. Now, enhanced participation in clinical research. These are the various components that you have in this process. And ensuring conduct of SOPs as per the SOPs is actually one of the most important components of the activity of the IEC, monitoring visits, checking records, monitoring serious adverse events, whether they have adhered to the prescribed timelines, continue interviews with participants, and interview with the investigators. Maintaining oversight is an important aspect, ensuring that all adverse events, serious adverse events are submitted on time, classification of adverse events, assess and suggest improvements to design as and when possible, ensure minimal harm to subsequent participants, ensure compensation when warranted, monitor deviations, violations, and accrual on the study. Now, obligation to society is what is resultant with good ethics, and that is essentially because society provides the resources for the conduct of research. Society is affected by research findings. To ensure each study has a scientific merit and answers a meaningful question, especially in the interest of society. Poor science leads to poor research, and that is actually because of bad ethics. What is the obligation to the researcher, institute, and sponsor? Timely review of the study protocol. suggest constructive changes to ensure adequate participation, review financial obligations, suggest collaborations, suggest possible medical, legal, and ethical considerations to the investigators that need to make the study more robust. Another important aspect of ethics is actually to ensure that all parties, all stakeholders declare the conflict of interest. And this is very important to be able to conduct the review process as well as conduct the study appropriately and by the regulatory rules. Now, dissemination of the knowledge generated again is very important. The role doesn't end with the end of the study. It also has to look at whether the study has been published or not. Even negative trials should be published because finally all this information is going to actually benefit future generations of patients and subjects. Now, about whether we can have different ethics committee looking at different kinds of studies, there are advantages and disadvantages to this. We do have several ethics committees in the Tata Memorial Center, and that's essentially because of the number of studies that we have to review, and also because we look at not only clinical studies, we also look at basic science studies and animal studies. All these have their advantages and disadvantages. Today at the TMH, what we have is to actually propagate as well as support meaningful, fruitful, effective, and efficient research and protect the safety and rights of the research subjects. We at the Institute have 3 ethics committees to review and monitor. We have a research infrastructure that is provided by the Central Research Secretariat, which provides us designated space, personnel, pharmacy labs, logistics support, and institutional administrative support is promised to us, or rather we get it through actually financial support by the administration and also because of the policymakers in this committee, which is the track. And of course, together we have the 3 IECs, we have the track, we have the Clinical Research Secretariat, we have a quality manager to support this endeavor, and of course, a legal advisor. And together this constitutes what we call as the Human Research Protection Program at the Tata Memorial Center. So in summary, if you look at the role of the Ethics Committee, these are various phases in which the Ethics Committee support as well as foster research. But what I would like to say is it is necessary, especially for us and countries like ours, to need to maintain the same ethical standards as available globally, establish interest and focus on patient-centered care. Safety as a priority needs to be definitely established, encourage meaningful clinical research, and most importantly, do no harm. And it all boils down to the integrity, both at the level of the committee, the participants, and the researcher. Thank you very much.